can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. Right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here, and we're about to get started. I'm the host of the Smart Business Revolution podcast, and we're recording this live, but on my podcast, I get to talk with all kinds of interesting CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of companies and organizations like YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, LendingTree, OpenTable, Act Software, and many more. I'm also the co-founder of Rise25, where we connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. And I'm here with my co-founder, Dr. Jeremy Wise. And let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Wise. For those of you who don't know him, in addition to co-founding and running Rise25 with he's been with myself. He's been featuring top entrepreneurs with video interviews since 2010. And he has featured the founders or CEOs of P90X, Atari, Einstein Bagels, Mattel, Orlando Magic, RX Bars, a few of those companies you've probably heard of before, many more on Inspired Insider. He also was a senior producer for 6 years at one of the early top business podcasts, helping to put systems in place for them and run some of the behind the scenes operations. And even before we put together the Rise25 podcast service, where we help companies to run and get ROI from their podcast, he would say all the time, every business should have a podcast because hands down, it's one of the best things that he's ever done in his business and life. He's made best friends, met his business partner, that's me, had countless clients and referral partners who've come from the relationships that have come from the podcast. And we're going to talk about one element of that here today. So what we're going to talk about here today is the actual outreach, reaching out, particularly to VIPs or influencers. It could be a top client prospect, it could be a top referral partner or strategic partner, but we're going to really break down for you the process that you need to follow and what elements need to go into that outreach message if you want to be successful about it. And I can say that I have featured, CEOs of publicly traded companies. I featured billionaires on my podcast, and Jeremy, absolutely the same as well. So Jeremy, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. The most common question we get, I would say, at least I get, is how do you get in touch with these people? And then when you asked a bunch of people, what are you most interested in having us talk about? They said, how do you cold email VIPs? Right. And so we figured we'd break down the exact process. We would even share exactly what we write on this. Yeah. And I've, sent out 11 today as we're talking. I've sent 11 of them today. And they're customized, but in our lives, we come from the same, kind of thought process of how do you give to someone? How do you give to someone as much as humanly possible? So when we're thinking of anything, approaching someone, immediately we're thinking of number one, how do you give to that person?
And the reason for this in part is because, when everyone else is zigging, if you zag, you stand out. And how many times a day do you get an email solicitation or a LinkedIn solicitation from someone who just immediately tries selling to you, immediately tries pitching you on something, and it just never works well, right? 1 in a million times does it work well. People do it because they spray and pray and hope it'll work. But if you turn that around and in a manageable way, you lead with a give rather than ask, it's a lot more effective. So that's point number one, is reaching out with a give. What do you mean by that, Jeremy? I mean, does that mean like, here, I'm going to send you a box of cookies? What does that mean about a give?
So we were talking about this, and we reverse engineered when we write and we reach out, what is in that reach out, okay? And the first thing that we talked about was giving. And the giving could be a number of things. In our situation, it's profiling them and their thought leadership and their company and whatever product or service they're working on now on our podcast. Because, having a podcast, you have a platform that you can give to others.
Right. And I should point out that it doesn't have to be with a podcast. So, we both employed this strategy by...
No, it does have to be a podcast because we have a podcast service. No, I'm just kidding.
I do want to point out that there are other ways of doing it, but we have found over the years that it's not as effective for a number of reasons. So, people use this strategy, by featuring people in a book or an article or a video interview or something along those lines. And what we found is that the best combination of speed and simplicity is
personal connection.
And personal connection is using a podcast. I wrote for Forbes for a number of years, Business Insider. I've written for Entrepreneur.
You featured a lot of people in those articles.
I did. And what I found was that at the end of the year, really, because of all the work that went into it, I would end up connecting with, a half dozen, 10, 12 people, something like that.
Writing's difficult. I mean,
it is
writing
difficult.
an article is not easy. You crafting those things takes a long time.
It takes a lot of time. Get through the editorial process. You got accepted to larger platforms like that. And what I eventually found is that you could maximize the number of relationships, which is really the name of the game. If you actually were just recording something and you didn't have to spend all that time in the post-production process of writing an article, producing an article, getting it published, getting past the editorial process, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So the first is give.
So
and we'll break down actually our exact emails, but the first one is give. We want to make sure there's a give in that outreach message.
Great. So what's the second piece?
The second is social proof, right? So if anyone is studying direct response marketing, copywriting, that they will pound into your head that you have to have social proof elements. And we'll break down what is social proof elements. Social proof elements could be, well, you did it in the beginning of the interview, right? You say, I've had founders of, CEOs of Activision, Blizzard, LendingTree, OpenTable. Like, that's social proof because they're saying, oh, John, if you had these other people, or Jeremy, you've had the founders of Atari, P90X, RX Bar, you had these people, that's complete social proof, right?
It's providing they're essentially vouching that you or that individual.
It's validating. It's validating that you're legit.
Yes. Okay.
Right.
Got it.
So validating that you're legit.
So how do you do that if you feel like you don't have any social proof? What is that? Is that like your background?
That's
your
a great
your
question.
Work experience?
Yeah, we get that a lot. So exactly. So let's say you feel like, well, let's say some, people say to us all the time, I just started my podcast. I don't have any guests. What do I do? Well, most of the time they have some type of social proof. They have past client, we say past clients, past people they worked with, years of experience in the industry. Like I was talking to someone this morning, they've been in the medical industry for 40 years.
Wow.
They've had some of the consultant, been some of the part of some of the top medical schools in the country. And so that is social proof. Wow. I've been in this for 40 years. I've had, basically helped this medical school, this medical school, this medical school. Like naming the medical schools are social proof. The years are social proof. So there's a lot of social proof there.
So it's often maybe things that are already in your bio. Like if you're going to read a bio of you, what are the things that you would recount? If you've written a book, the name of the book. If you've been quoted in certain reputable, well-known publications, you'd maybe do that. Your education, certainly, your experience, all those sorts of things. Yeah. And okay, so that's the second piece. So the third piece, what's the third piece then?
The third piece is what is called the velvet rope, and we want to give credit for that. So John, why don't you talk about the velvet rope? Yeah.
So I give credit to Michael Port, who's been a big mentor and a friend. He uses this term in a number of his books. And what it means is essentially you want to make it so that they want to get inside. Think of like a club or something like that has a velvet rope outside, even if there's no one inside, if there's a velvet rope and two people waiting in line, like everyone wants to get in. So it's kind of the same thing. So you want to make sure that it's not just that it's open to anyone. We'll just take anyone, but I want to profile you, I want to feature you. And because you're one of the top CMOs in the manufacturing industry in the tri-state area, or because you're one of the top, business development executives in the Southern Florida area working in retail today. It's like you want them to want to be a part of that community or group of people that you're going to be featuring. And actually a concept that you use is your idea of a series, not a season, especially when it comes to podcasts. So a lot of times you see podcasts and people want to do a season. there's a big difference between a series and a season. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a similar, that is exactly, I didn't realize that's what I was doing at the time, but it is a velvet rope, right?
Mhm.
So if I did, say I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison, and when I did the top Wisconsin Entrepreneur Series, that was people want to be included in the top Wisconsin Entrepreneur Series.
Who
At the
doesn't want to be
time,
considered a top founder from your alma mater? It's like you
right.
made it, right?
And the thing is, John, I realized that I was going to do the top University of Wisconsin series, but I realized, well, why not just do Wisconsin? Like broaden it. And there's lots of people that came out of University of Milwaukee, University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, lacrosse, Madison. So I was like, I just made it broader and did a Wisconsin series, but that's the velvet rope. It's a velvet rope in terms of grouping them into a series. So
right. So now, did we talk about the commonality or the common connection?
No.
Did we talk about it? I think we
No.
kind of skipped over that, but that's an important one.
So the next one will actually, with open loop was the next one. So it has to have a give. It has to have social proof. You have to have a velvet rope. You don't have to, but it works better. And the open loop.
Yeah. So
talk
open
about
loop.
You do the open loop.
Yeah. So the open loop is not including all of the information in your initial outreach message, so that the person wants to, it opens a loop, so to speak, so that they want to close that loop. We naturally have a curiosity towards that.
Yeah.
So if someone says, I can share more details with you, or says like, let me know if that's of interest and I'll provide for you the additional information that you would need, people naturally are curious. And so what you want to do in an outreach message like this is open that loop, so it's naturally invites them to respond. If nothing more than to get that additional information. But then what that effectively does is it carries forward the conversation. One, it gets a response and it gets you into a conversation. And then it's harder for people to say no once they are in that conversation.
Yeah. I mean, John, I went down the path and did the top direct response marketing copywriting series, right? And I had some of the best people on the planet. And one of the things they said was there was a story about what's the number one thing that you want to make sure to include in your copy out of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And there was lots of guesses.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you want to find out more, you have to listen to the next episode. No, we could open a loop and just actually have them watch. But the number one thing was curiosity. The number one thing was curiosity. Right. Gary Halbert, I don't remember who I was talking to. Maybe it was Caleb O'Dowd or Sam Markowitz, one of the Gary Halbert proteges. And it was a Gary Halbert story. And that's, comes from him. And it was curiosity. So opening a loop creates some curiosity.
Right. And if you watch any local news, if you listen to, news radio anytime, they do this every time, right? Right before the commercial break, coming up next, have we found the fountain of youth? Find out. We'll be right back, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to stay for 2 minutes to listen to these commercials. So that's exactly,
totally
what's happening there.
And the next one is what you're referring to. So give, social proof, velvet rope, open loop. The next is instant connection.
Instant connection.
So how do you form instant connection?
And I think we were alluding to it earlier. It's with things that you have in common, right?
Yeah. I mean, instant connection. So again, like all of this is customized. This isn't just templated and you just throw it out to everyone. You really need to customize this. But instant connection, if you look at most of the time, you could look at someone's LinkedIn profile and form some kind of instant connection or their about page. It could be, John, somewhere where they live. It could be a college they went to. It could be hey, Michael. It could be, anything that it could be they have 4 kids. I was reading something, this morning, one of the people I was reaching out to, they wrote an article on like having 6 kids and running a business. So if I were John and reaching out to the person, go, I'm not as cool as you. I have 4 kids. You have 6 kids. And you get this instant connection, like we're both entrepreneurs that have a lot of kids. So there's definitely something you can find in that. And I think you and I kind of hone in on that in the beginning when we're looking at something. How do we form an instant connection with someone? It could be places you lived, hobbies you have, all those things.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, this just happened yesterday. You emailed someone and CC'd me on it, and I looked down at the person's email signature, and it said that they were from my hometown, not the one I live in now, but the one I went to high school in. My
Right.
parents still live there, and I knew the exact address, knew exactly where the building is and everything, and I just mentioned that. I just said, "Oh, hey, you're right from I live right near you. Went to the high school close by." Because that's an immediate connection. It
Immediate.
bonds you. Yeah,
Immediate.
right. So any final thoughts, Jeremy?
No, so let's go through some actual copy. We have some different approaches, so we can maybe read the actual copy of the email. I know sometime you have a short email that you'll send with the open
Sure.
loop, and
I
then
can
do a
read that.
long email. And
Yeah.
then sometimes, honestly, I just go straight with the long email, which I should probably do more of what you do, which is open a loop. So I'll read my my cold email, and I sent 11 of these today and modified them accordingly. So I'll let you go with your short and long version.
Sure. So I have a short version. This is so short that I can use it via text message. I can use it via email. I can use it on a LinkedIn message or however. And often I use it once I have already had an immediate connection with them, but like an email exchange or something like that. Or I'm connected with them on LinkedIn already. Or sometimes I send it cold. So before I've had any real communication with them. So I'll say something just like, the first sentence is just straight and to the point. If I have something in common, then it would be something like, "Hey, by the way, we both went to University of San Francisco," or something like that. If we have something in common, or "Hey, we both did a stint."
Yeah, you want to lead with the instant connection,
right? Or "Hey, Bill Jones told me that I should reach out and connect with you. He said you guys had a great time last month in Cabo," or whatever. Something that you have in common. So, and then I'll say, "I'd love to interview you on my podcast, period. I've been podcasting since, in my case, 2010, but you don't have to put that in there if you haven't been doing it for a while. And I've interviewed 400 plus entrepreneurs, business owners, business book authors, including the founders or CEOs of Activision, Blizzard, LendingTree, OpenTable, Act Software, Contactually, and many more. And I can share more details, ... That's intentional, ... because that is opening the loop right there.
Yeah.
So it's very short.
The give, the social proof, the velvet rope, the open loop, and the instant connection.
Each of the pieces are there. Right. So, and then, sometimes people read that and they think, well, I can't do that. That's his story. I don't have any of those things. Well, but you just break it down by the different elements that we were talking about there, and you substitute your own social proof. You substitute your own experience or your own commonality, and you can structure an outreach message in the same way. You want to share yours?
So go on. Do you want to talk about the long one?
So the longer version then when someone responds back and they say, "Great, I'd love to know more details," then I send them a longer version. And it basically just says, "Here are all the details." And then I have multiple different paragraphs. So I'll say, how long I've been podcasting for. At this point, it's been quite a while. It's been about 10 years now, but I've been doing this for a number of years. And so I started doing it, previously. And I talk a little bit about what I focus on the podcast, but pretty much this second follow-up message is designed to answer every possible question that person might have, because I don't want to spend a ton of time going back and forth answering questions. So I want to answer all their questions in there. So I give links to past episodes that they can check out. I list people who've been guests on my podcast. Now that's designed so that when they look over the list of names, they say, "Wow, how could I possibly say no to this outreach message if all these other people said yes?" So I also describe what exactly I like to ask about, because people frequently want to know, what are you going to ask me about? And then I give them a link directly to book a time so that they can go ahead and do it, directly if they want. Or I say they can also message me back if they can't find a time. Format, I talk about what the format is, how I record the interviews, how long they're going to last. I answer, they often ask, do you send me the questions in advance? So I say, no, I don't do that. I don't pre-script them. I keep them casual. And then I give some information about me. So I say, by the way, here's some more details about me in case they don't know much about me. And then finally, composition of my audience. That's another common question that I got, was who are the types of people that are going to be listening to this? So that's the basic breakdown and the follow-up message.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for that. Yeah. And that's a good point. With the second email or with my first email, you want to make sure you answer the most commonly asked questions that they're going to have, because those are, objections that they may have of why not doing it. So I'll tell you mine. And so my outreach, I sent 11 of them today, and I customize it. So usually I will look at their LinkedIn profile. I may even look at their about page. And if they're important enough to you, you should do a little bit of research and give some context. So I basically will start off saying, I really love what you've done with this company. And I won't stop there. And I will say something like, I saw that in 2015, just 2015 alone, you added 72 staff. And this year you moved into another large facility. So I'll actually show them I did a little research on them. I'm not just like blanket, messaging them. Or here, like you said, the instant connection piece, I may say, John told me that you had an amazing company. And once I looked at it, I saw you did X, Y, Z. So immediately, if they know you, John, they'll be like, oh, cool. Like I'll read on because I know John too, or whoever. So there's that instant, connection. The next piece is, like you said, giving some social proof, because they're like, okay, cool. We have mutual connections. And then I say with the exact ask, I would love to feature you on my podcast. So you want to be straight and to the point so they don't have to read 3 paragraphs deep to know what you're asking. So right is straight to the point. I'd love to have you on my podcast. Now they're thinking, why would I go on your podcast? Right. So now you got to provide some social proof and say, I'd love to feature you alongside other founders. I've had the CEOs and founders of P90X, Quest Nutrition, Einstein Bagels, Atari, Mattel, Baby Einstein, Big League Chew. The list goes on. So I say, you'll definitely be a good company. And if you haven't had those, like John said before, you could just include whatever social proof elements you have. And then here's where I put out, I will say, check out this link, check out the links in my signature for popular episodes. Like if they're interested. Sometimes I will take, so like in my signature, I have the link to the P90X one, the Einstein Bagels, the Atari one. But here I may put something really industry specific to them. Like if it's a top SaaS founder and they've heard of, Zapier, I will go, here's the one, I know you're in SaaS. Here's the one I did with, Wade, founder of Zapier, and I'll put it in there. So someone in their industry. And then I will even borrow credibility. The other thing is we talked about social proof. You could borrow credibility from platforms. So we're going to promote the interviews to our email subscribers, social media, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and many more. And if you have a number around that, which we do, we're going to promote it to over 165,000 of our email subscribers, social media following. Put that in there.
Yeah.
And then I do the ask again, because I said in the front, I'd love to have you on the podcast. All I want is a yes or no. Like John opens the loop. I just want a yes or no, and then I'll send more details. So I go, would you be up for an interview? ? And then I have parentheses. Some people, now we're not traveling. Some people is like, is this via phone? Are we meeting in person? So I will say it's all done via video conference at the comfort of your own home, close parentheses. And then thanks, Jeremy. And then I have, anyone worth their salt in copywriting has taught me, have a PS. So of course I have a PS, and so whatever you put in the PS, it could be more social proof. It could be another interview link. I put, I've already asked, I just want a yes or no. Like, are you interested or not? Like, would you be up for an interview? That's it. So I'm always
like the
looking for
casual
yes or no.
nature of that. Are you up for an interview? It's not even like committing to like scheduling a time. It's just like, are you open to the idea?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is elite. Yeah. One other thing I was going to mention that I put in some outreach messages or in a follow-up, I'll say, if you look through my past guest list, you'll see I've had a very impressive list of CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, that sort of thing. In many cases, after I've conducted the interview, I know more about you, and I've been able to make great introductions between my guests, introducing some of, my guests to other prior guests, which have led to all kinds of different things, from people starting businesses together to strategic partnerships, referral arrangements, great collaborations, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So you can take a look at my past guest list, and there may be someone that I may be able to introduce you to. So
that's a great thing to lead with, actually, because that's another give. Besides being on the podcast, it's like, and you and I both make maybe 10 to 20 introductions every day. So I should probably put that in my outreach message.
Yeah, right. So I actually don't have it in my outreach, but I should add that.
I'm going to change that and put a PPS.
Yeah, there you go.
And because of this conversation. So
that's great.
Look, you learned something new.
So what? Any final thoughts?
I just added it.
Any final thoughts, Jeremy, on this?
No. And I guess in the PS, I will, if they want to make it super easy, I will sometimes include, maybe here, send me your schedule to make it super convenient, or throw out a few times, or here's my schedule type of thing. So, I think that's it. I think that about sums it up. Make sure to include those elements of give. Social proof, velvet rope, open loop, instant connection.
Well, that was great. Dr. Weiss, remind everyone where they can connect with you and learn more about you.
Yeah, I mean, they could go to Rise25. And when I tell people to go to Rise25, watch the video. John, people say we're like an old married couple bantering on the opening video.
It's like a 9 or 10 minute video there. It's kind of funny. You and I talking about some of the strategies that we're talking about here.
Yeah, we talk about some of the strategies. And, since I think, John, I can actually share my screen. So I'm going to do that, and I'll show you. So this video here is we're running the official podcast of a large 17,000 person conference. And we talk about some of the principles of podcasting and how do you get ROI from podcasting.
Right. All right. So thanks, everyone. We'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.